to the Josilyn Drake Show. I am your host, Josilyn Drake. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm excited about our show on today. You know, we're in this season of COVID-19 and we're all getting acquainted with our families, love our families. However, this new normal brings forth challenges, which brings to mind the state of our family now. According to our 2019 Census Bureau statistics, in a state of emergency. One in every four children under the age of 18 lives at home with a single mother. And so when I saw our guest pen a book titled #Fatherhood, I thought it would be the perfect person for us to talk about the state of family without having fathers in the home on today. Will you help me to welcome to the Gospel Show, Xuam Lawson? He's syndicated radio host of Real Gospel in Nashville, Tennessee, WFSK at Fix University.
With you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to interview with us. I hope that this information really blesses your life. Mr. Xuam, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm originally born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. At the age of 15, we moved from Brooklyn, New York to Athens, Georgia. Once I graduated from Cedar Shores High School in Athens, Georgia, I joined the Army. I ended up being stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I'm a Gulf War veteran, and I matriculated through life a couple of years, made a bunch of unwise decisions before I decided to let the Lord back into my life and went back to school. I have an associate's degree in radio broadcasting and a bachelor's of arts and theological studies from American Baptist College here in Nashville.
Awesome. I came to know Mr. Xuam in about 2012, 2013. I released a couple of singles from my debut album, Worship You, and my album began to go up the charts, the Billboard gospel charts, and it was people like Mr. Xuam who was playing my music that caused especially my second single, it topped the gospel Billboard charts, and I was of course, a newbie. That was pretty phenomenal for me, and I really thank him and the others who supported me in playing the music that got me to that place. But Mr. Xuam, can you tell us a little bit about, being that radio broadcaster? You get a chance to meet tons and tons of people. I know you and I have interviewed 2 or 3 times before, and I appreciate you letting me I appreciate you allowing me to come on your radio station and get the word out about my singles.
Yes. Well, to God be the glory on that. I spent over 10 years. I've been in the radio business as a radio personality for over 20 years. I started out in pop music with Britney Spears, the Backstreet Boys, Third Eye Blind, Hootie and the Blowfish, and also as an account executive. And then I went to the R&B side and helped break a lot of artists, Biggie Smalls, a lot of Jay-Z, a lot of different artists that came about in the 90s and the early 2000s. And then when I accepted the job as program director for WFSK, which is from public to private, commercial radio to public radio, which is what WFSK is now. When I became the program director there, I got an opportunity to host my own program because at that particular time, I had answered my call into the ministry and was trying to figure things out, but God opened that door for me and I was able to have my own gospel program, which is now syndicated, and it's called Real Gospel with the X-Man.
Awesome. That is pretty phenomenal. You've been in
Yes.
for a minute. So we want to know, why did you write this book, #Fatherhood?
Well, that's a long story. We sort of went into that before, but to make the longer story short, I wanted a way to communicate with my children using godly principles for things that they would deal with in their everyday lives and things that they were dealing with in their everyday lives. And so #fatherhood it's the best way to describe it. My daughter called it a devotional. And so I hadn't thought about it as a devotional, but I guess it pretty much is sort of a devotional. So it has short quotes at the top of the page, which says, as your father, I believe that what you're dealing with, that God is going to bring you through, and that as your father. As a matter of fact, let me just grab a copy and just sort of open it just to give you an example.
Yes,
So on day one,
see it. So when our viewers begin to go and look for it out in Amazon, they know what it
yes,
is. Can you show us the front of the book? The front
yes,
#fatherhood. Awesome. So guys,
yes.
please go pick up a copy of this book.
Yes, and it's available on Amazon and Kindle for download, and it's also available on my website at www.xuamlawson.com. And I guess you can put that in your screen, but it's XUAMLAWSON.com. But on day 135, it says, "As your father, I must allow you to make mistakes, so you will value my advice and not take me for granted. As the saying goes, life is the best teacher." And then I sign off by saying, "I love being a father," #fatherhood. And so that was just my way of giving advice to my children on allowing them to make mistakes. But in doing so, I want you to know that the advice that I'm giving you, I'm not saying it just to be saying it. I'm saying it so that when the time comes for God to reveal the truth of the matter to you, that it will come full circle for you. And then I have under that is the wisdom of it. And the wisdom of it simply says, "I love you with all my heart." There are times you and I will be going through trials and tribulations in life, but in order for your character to grow, your faith has to grow in God, and you gain experience through this. I must watch from the sidelines every now and then. And then everything is followed up with the scripture. So the scripture for this is Ephesians 4:29. "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." So everything that I say is backed up with a scripture and an analysis. And then you probably won't be able to see it in here, but there are also lines in here where they can write their own personal notes on how they feel. So if you are a child or a youth or a grown-up, and you want to write your own personal notes in there, you can. And so you can start your own journal that way as well.
Awesome. You know, when you were talking, you said a mouthful. There are a couple of points that I wanted to go back and piggyback on. Number one, just the fact of hearing a man say, "I love being a father," really,
Mm-hmm.
in today's status quo, that's phenomenal. But what you said was, "I have to allow you to make your own mistakes, and I have to sit on the sidelines." I have adult children, and that is, I tell you, one of the hardest things to do is
It
to
is.
allow them to make their own mistakes, because, I've always kind of told my kids, like, I've already done that. Learn from what I've learned, and then you go make your own. And when you have your children, you tell them, I've already done that. And so they can go on and make their own. And to me, that allows us to grow. But what frustrates me more than anything is for them to make the same mistakes that I've made, when they could have learned. So you said sitting on the sidelines. As they grew older, that is what I learned I had to do. And gosh, was it very humbling
Mm-hmm.
to be able to
That's
allow
true.
them just to live. So how did you get that courage? How did you just trust God on that? That He got them, in regardless of the mistakes that are coming down the road from some of the decisions that they made.
Well, life is a great teacher. I'm fortunate to have both my mother and father to instill a lot of wisdom in me. Although the book is written from a male perspective, I do mention my mother in the book, and I do give her credit for a lot of things. But I also wanted to make sure I talk to my mother first, because she also writes the forward, which is in the book. And I wanted her to understand how much I do love her. But as men, we need help. And I needed to address certain things in terms of manhood and fatherhood. And so watching from the sidelines is something that I learned, one, from my father, Lee Lawson, and how he parented me and allowed me to make a ton of mistakes that some things I learned the hard way. But then I came to understand, without learning the hard way, then I would not be able to understand what he meant by a lot of things. And then the second portion is my relationship with God. Because, like I said, I spent a lot of years in the wilderness, and God allowed me to make so many mistakes. And He did warn me on so many issues, as in the Bible. And then when I finally came to myself as the prodigal son, then I realized, like, wow, I really should have put more effort into the way God has wanted me to do things, and I would have been so much better off having done so. So those two individuals, my earthly father and my heavenly father, have allowed me to shape that vision. And just like you just said, even as parents, you do want to step in and help your children. And sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But the wisdom of it is sort of knowing when to allow them to have that space to grow, and then also being there for them to catch them and help them get through whatever the situation is.
Yeah, I think my kids taught me how not get angry,
Mhm.
because I would get like fired up, mad at them after they made
Yeah,
mistakes, and like, didn't I tell you
yeah.
not to do that? Didn't I say if you do this, this is what's going to happen? And so I think what they taught me more than anything is how to love unconditionally, and how to support even when people make mistakes, how to still be there. And that was a difficult thing for me because I never saw that modeled, especially, with Christians. You make a mistake, you have to, they're just going to toss you
Oh,
out. It's over. There is no support and there is no grace. And so my kids taught me how to love people with grace and how to be patient with them, because I lacked that seriously. And I thank God for
yeah.
the keys that He gave me through that. So
Mhm.
let's talk about the fact that you said you love being a father.
Mhm.
Today, you hear many men, and maybe you can answer this question. They don't want to be a husband. They don't want to be a father. Really, a lot of them are just, what they want to do is go for success at any, cost necessary. It doesn't matter. So, how did you get to the place where, when we were getting ready to log on, you said, "Oh, I forgot. My wife told me I had." Can we push it back? And I love the fact that you honor your wife like that, and you honor your children. So not only does it look like you say that you love being a father, but it seems as if you love being a husband as well. So how did you get to that place?
Um, a lot of prayer, a lot of patience, and a lot of understanding that I'm not alone in this. So I'm glad you brought my wife up, Regina Lawson. So shouts out to her when she gets an opportunity to sort of sit down and watch this dynamic interview. And again, I didn't say thank you for having me on again at the top. So I want to thank you for this forum. I really appreciate you. And yeah, but I had a partner in this, and that is my wife. I wasn't able to get to this place alone. We have a blended family, so I had kids out of wedlock before I got married, and then we do have one biological child together, and we have three others that are in the house, so a total of four within the house. And so I had to. I looked at it this way: in order for me to want here's the best way I can explain this. My father came to visit me one day on his birthday, maybe 15 years ago. We got in the car, and I said, I'm going to take you to go visit your grandkids. So on our way back from the visit, he says to me, I see what your problem is. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, you are going to have to come to the realization that another man is going to have to raise your kids. And when he said that, it took me a second to realize what he was saying. But what he was saying was, if you're not ready to commit in terms of marriage, then you cannot continue to live a life where you've got one foot in the door, where you are a father slash boyfriend, and then another foot where you're trying to do everything else with your life. Is one or the other. And when I realized that, I said, "Oh my God, that's what I'm doing." And and as I became more aware of my behavior, that's when God was really able to. Again, a lot of this is in the book, but I eventually get to a place where I look in the mirror and I say, "Oh my God, Lord, I need to change how I'm living, because I don't want my children to grow up and see me as someone who was not worthy of being a better father. So to make a longer story short, I just eventually put God first and asked God to help show me who my wife needed to be, so that we could together begin to form the type of union that not only will be pleasing to God, but it would show me as a husband. It would show me as a man of God. It would show me as a father, and it would show me as a godly father. I needed all those things to come into place so that my children could come to a home where they could be nurtured the proper way and not the way I was trying to do it.
Whew.
I said a mouthful, I know.
Well,
That's the short version.
but when your daddy said that you were being a boyfriend,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
well, praise God to your father that he
yeah,
corrected you and say, listen, you are supposed to be a husband, not a
yeah,
boyfriend. And if
yeah,
you don't make adjustment, someone else gonna be raising your kids. And so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
oh
And can I say something about that?
yes.
Because part of the reason that we have, and we you and I talked about this, part of the reason why we have so many single women households is because a lot of us as men who are those of us who are not in jail, those of us who are out here and who are able to be better fathers, we are sort of looking at our women as more of a piece of meat per se, or someone that we're just hooking up with, even though they have our children. Or if you're dating someone and she has children and you're not trying to commit. And so, as men, we have to look at our women as viable women, viable, better halves of ourselves to help us in our lives and in our situations. If I'm dating a woman who is a single mom, I need to look at her as, okay, is this woman potentially can she be my wife? How should I look at her? And God allows us to, there's a process by which we can look at her and understand what kind of woman she is. Is she the right woman for me? If I have children already, what does this look like? And so if we think that way and take sex out of the equation, then everything else can fall in place when you put God first.
You were saying so much and things were right. I had a million questions. One of them that I sent to you is, how did you get to a place where, or how do you help men get to a place where they can love another man's child as though it was their child? You know,
Yeah,
especially with this culture, with a lot of women having having kids. You know, so there are a lot of women with children. There are a lot of men with children. I think I talked to you um, in our earlier conversation about
mhm,
brother-in-law, who's now a single father to no fault of his own. My sister passed about 3 years ago, and he found himself having to raise a 10-year-old girl, and he's doing a phenomenal job. You know, the Lord has blessed him with a great village, but that was nothing that he decided to do on his own. Life happened. But then there are some of us through our choices, having sex and knowing we shouldn't when we're not married, and what comes out of sex most of the time are children. And so when we decide to not abort them but to go ahead and have them, now we have the responsibility of raising them. And in this culture, as it says, one in four children under the age of 18 are in a single parent home. That's the mother is the head of the household. So inevitably, if men are looking for women or wives, um, it's 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 kind of a place where you're going to end up with having to decide whether or not you're going to be with someone that have children. So how does a man get a heart to love someone else's children? Because men, of course, selfish by nature. Um, we look at Joseph, though, in the Bible, Jesus' daddy. Jesus was a blended family. His family was blended, and Joseph loved Jesus. How do you think a man gets a heart to be able to love someone else's child?
that takes a lot of work and a lot of selflessness from both parents. And when I say both parents, there has to be a conversation that should take place between the two, between the man and the woman. Okay, let's say for example, I'll use my marriage as an example. That's the best way. My wife and I, because we have a blended family, I needed to make sure that she understood everything about me and about my children, where they were, who the mothers are, and the nature of my relationship with them. And I had to understand the same with her. And there had to be trust between she and I in terms of being able to communicate. I give her the freedom to communicate with the fathers because they need to be able to have freedom, and I need to be able to trust them to be able to discuss the things that need to be discussed for the children. It's better for them. I, in turn, also ask for the same trust and respect in dealing with my co-parents. And so that conversation must happen because what's most important are the children. And to get to the heart of your question, I have to make sure that if I mistreat my stepchildren, how can I, in turn, if I love my own children, expect the man that is in the household with them to treat them well? What goes around comes around, per se. So the best, the better a stepfather I can be, then the more I can ask God to cover and protect my children where they are. It has to be that way because for the sake of everybody involved. And I did go through an experience where in one of the households, that particular father to my children was not the best individual that should have been there. But at the same time, I that he's not their father, he's their stepfather. And fatherhood belongs to me. I'm always going to be daddy. I'm always going to be your father. And that's why I said I love being a father, because it's important for my children to know from birth to wherever they are in life that I love them as their father. They need to hear it. They need to be reassured of that. No matter what's going on in their lives, no matter the up and down situations that I find myself in as co-parents, they have to understand that no matter what, I love you. And that's why that phrase, I love being a father, is in there specifically because they need to read it. They need to see it. They need to be reaffirmed of it. Because let's face it, there are some times when as fathers, because we're stereotyped, we're we're put down in so many areas of our lives, but it's my responsibility to mine and a household that I'm responsible for to be the best that I can be, to do my part in trying to steer the ship back into the right course.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of stereotypes when it comes to absolutely. Um, Something you said, you and your wife having the conversation about how your household is going to work, how you came to that agreement. That was some grown folk stuff that you
Yeah,
you
yeah,
need to be mature people to sit down and say, listen, it is about our children. That's basically how you always win. You put the reason why, what is most important out of all of this is, which is the children. So everything we do is flowing out of that vein. It's not about all of our issues and our stuff. It's about making sure that we create the right environments for our children to succeed and
yeah.
excel. So I would say kudos to you and your wife. Kudos to your other uh, children's moms and how you all.
Co-parents, yes. I give them a shout out in the book, by the way, because in order for me to be brutally honest, I have to be honest with myself as well as with my children. They know my story. They know the things that I have done. And they don't just know it because someone told them. They know it because I told them. I had to be the person to say, look, here's what happened. Here's what I did. But that has nothing to do with how I feel about you.
Mhm.
And so you said that's some grown up stuff, but I had to learn that. And when you're looking for, when you're trying to date, when you're in a relationship, there has to be someone around or someone that, I mentor a lot of people. People come to me because you never know how people see your light or see what you're doing. Because when I was doing it, I wasn't doing it to be a mentor. I was not doing it for any other reason other than, I've got to get this right. I've got to get this right, because if I don't, then failure is not an option here.
Mm.
It was just something in me, the God in me, that just said, I've got to do this the right way. I've done it the wrong way, but that doesn't mean I have to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
And as a man, I've got to step up to the plate the best way possible and get the rest of this right. Even though I've made unwise decisions in the past, this is the day that I take one step at a time and start being a better man.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. Awesome. Yeesh, that's taking a look in the mirror, and we all have to do that. We all got to look in the mirror and look at ourselves and see what needs to be changed. But kudos to you and your wife, and being an example of what it looks like to for a man to say, I love God enough to make the changes, allow God to do the work on the inside of me, and then for your wife to do the same, and to walk in agreement with that. And I know that takes some like you said, selflessness to be able to get to that place, and walk that out. So, and because of it, your children are better, and now they can display some things differently. They can won't have to do some things that go through some things that you went through, because you got keys and you are able to show them something different, not just tell them, but actually model it before them, and so they see it. And then, we become what we behold. And so, what they are seeing in the house, we're excited that it's one more family that's doing it right, that can be an example to some other families. So we thank God.
Let me also say this to you, Jocelyn, that I find to be very important, that I want the viewers to understand. I also have to give kudos, and I do mean kudos, to my kids' fathers who helped in co-parenting us in a village type of atmosphere. Um, I got along with them because it was important for the children to see that we could all get along, that we could all coexist, that we could all go to a birthday party someplace and all be in the same place at the same time, celebrating a birthday, celebrating an occasion where everybody could come together and come together in peace and harmony. And that if there was a disagreement between my wife and her co-parent, I did not interfere in that. I allowed her and him to deal with whatever needed to be dealt with. It with exceptions meaning that if there was an area or a situation that required my counsel or required me to come in and cover her, then I did so. But I didn't have to do that on many of the occasions, because we all had a mutual understanding that we were going to get along. And that takes a commitment from starting from myself and then to my wife, that no matter how egregious we think any situation is, and that included on my end in paying child support, and we wouldn't even talk about that, but on those ends, that no matter what, I personally was not going to allow anything to interfere with those relationships. And I try to teach that to my wife so that we can have that to go around, because again, the most important thing was making sure that our children grew up with as much love and understanding and a family atmosphere as possible. Fatherhood.
You mentioned child support. Um, Today I want you to kind of talk about how can we save the next generation from making this mistake. When you're young, the testosterone is growing, and it's a game to you. You want to conquer, you want to get as many as you can, so you can tell the boys, attaboy, they can pat you on the back and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What you don't realize is that it's going to affect your future. And that when you bring these children in the world, although you may not have a job, or you may work at McDonald's, um, when life keeps going on and you start doing well, child support, they're going to take that money from you. And so if you are not with that young lady, and now you got other bills, so you're taking care of 2, 3, 4 households, and that's hard to be able to live and survive like that, and it makes you, if you're not mature enough, to resent your children because you're having to pay this money and you barely can take care of the house that you're in because you made some unwise decisions. So how can we help young men not go down that path and realize like your choices have consequences? I know it may seem fun, it may make you seem like you the man and all your boys will be patting you on the back, but when that child support get taken out of your check, none of them gonna be there. None of them
Yeah.
will be there. You got to pay it. So how can you? What would you say to young men to not make that decision? To just maybe practice abstinence. I taught that to my son, just as I taught that to my daughter. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I didn't want either one of them to have children out of wedlock. So how do we save these young men from making those type of mistakes that are life altering?
Yeah. Yeah. That's an excellent question. I have had those conversations with both my sons and daughters, and I try to be as real with them as possible. I use myself as an example, like I always do, and I talk about all the things that I would like to have done in life in terms of uh, within a family structure, not from a perspective of, well, if I didn't have you, it never comes from that, but it always comes from, you know what, um, I would love to do X, Y, Z, but my money is tight because I'm having to do this, and this. But what I want you to know is that what do you want to do with your life? And so I have them to write it down or to speak it. And so what does it take for you to get to X, Y, Z, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And so as they begin to envision what they want to be in life, I say, now picture trying to do that if you have a child. And then I say, how do you think that complicates things? And so I try to get them to think about the type of consequences that having a child out of wedlock can have, and what that would happen to them, how that impacts not just their quality of life, but also the quality of life on that child. And I've had those conversations with my sons. But just as important is I try to explain to them why they feel the way they feel. Why do you feel the need to or the urge to want to have sex? Well, I had the conversation with my daughter when she was a teenager, when she was about maybe 13, and I had the same conversation with my sons when they were about 13. So my wife also helped in this area because I said I need you to explain to our daughters what's going on with their bodies. Help them to understand what this means. Help them develop ways that they can deal with these urges. And then I had to have the same conversation with my son. Hey, son, she's looking kind of good, huh? Blah, 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 blah. And he starts laughing and smiling and hiding his face. I'm saying, look, let's just keep it real. I've been where you are. So I know how you feel. Tell me how you feel. Tell me what's going on in your mind. Articulate it to me. And so we begin to have a real conversation about what's going on, how he or she is seeing the world, and then trying to help them understand how to deal with it. And that sort of helps them in those moments when we're not around and peer pressure is there. We're in the age of social media, and they can watch everything on their phones now. And so just having these real conversations with them so that they're not sort of ignorant to the things of the world and the devices of the world that could end up causing them to make unwise decisions.
Do you think that in today's society, just thinking back biblically, how when a child or a man was 13 years old, a boy, he was considered a man at that age. And now, 18, our kids, 18, 21, 25, they're still trying to figure it out, and we're telling them, just live, don't rush, just live. And what does that do, you think, when we kind of tell them that it's not, you don't have to rush to be responsible. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
take your time, just be reckless, just be a child, just be immature for as long as you want to. And then, once you decide 28, 30, 50, then you can, think about being responsible. What do you think about that?
That's a good question, and that also starts with parenting. There are going to be those parents who sort of feel like, hey, go on out there and have fun. You're only young once, and so I try to again get them to see that God has a purpose for them. and that if they understand who they are in the eyes of God, that they don't have to succumb to those type of things, and that the peer pressure is going to be there, that they're going to be in situations with their friends when we're not around, whether they go to a party, whether they go to homecoming, whether they go to prom, whether they go out on a date, whatever the situation may be, that they have to remember who they are and remember to be as responsible as possible, because things can happen anywhere, even when they're in school. Remember, it takes an ongoing conversation. So it's not a conversation that you can only have one time. It's a conversation that has to be ongoing, because as you know, as a parent, that as they continue to grow, there are moments and times when we feel close to them, and it seems like they're sharing all of their world with us, and we feel like, yeah. And then there are times when they're distant from us, and we can't get anything out of them. But that's just the stages of life. But as we continue to if we have doing our part and having ongoing conversations, that in those moments when they feel withdrawn, or they're going through something, or they're dealing with a relationship, or breakup, or boyfriends or girlfriends for the very first time, and all those things, that we are there to sort of continue to pour into them goodness and kindness and nurture them through it.
Mm, awesome. Nurturing them through it. That's
Yeah.
a word in the African American community. I don't know if that's a do you think that's a word that we know, nurturing? Because normally what I his child, if you don't do what I tell you to do, go somewhere and sit down. What did I
That's how I grew up. Yeah.
so you couldn't have a word in edgewise. I remember raising my son. I would always tell him, I don't mind you, telling me, Mom, that wasn't the case, or you misunderstood what I said. But there's a time when you tell me, like, if I'm scolding you, that's not the time, because I'm going to see it as disrespect. But when it's over with, then you can come back and have a conversation. Say, well, that really didn't happen that way. So I kind of learned how to have conversations with my children. Whereas, as you mentioned, I was raised that if you don't go sit down somewhere, your voice, you had no voice, literally no
Yep.
voice. So you grow up not knowing how to express yourself or feel that you matter. I think when we talked earlier, I just talked about how the anger that we see manifested in our African American young men, because their voice has been just muzzled and silenced, and they can't express really what's going on the inside of them, because they're always shut down or told to shut up, or so how do we give back the voice, or understand that the voice of our children need to be respected? There We can learn something from everyone, and not to say that we just to let them tell us what to do. That's not what we're saying. But we do need to learn how to honor their voice, and have communication with them, so that they will allow us into their worlds, and we can kind of know, what's going on with their lives.
Yeah, that's a great question. How I learned, because I grew up old school like that, where I couldn't say much other than yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, and no ma'am. But I learned through family counseling, because we have a blended family, and so we ended up going to a free class at a church here in our community that offered free parenting classes, and so my wife and I decided to go. And little did I know, I thought the class was just going to be for she and I, but it ended up being for the entire family. And one of the things that I learned through the class, which was the class went on for about maybe 6 months, so it wasn't a 1 week or 2 week course. We're talking about family counseling for about 6 months with different phases. We went through a phase where we had to know how a child thinks between birth and 3 years old, and then 3 years old to 6 years old, then 6 to about 12, and then 12 to about, and then as adults. And so what that did was it taught us the different phases, and us as parents, and understanding how a child's mind works and thinks and things of that nature. And what we came to understand is that our children do have a voice. And one of the ways that, one of the tools that we use as a resource here in the home is, if a person says, I feel, then we all come into agreement that once a person says, I feel, and then they go on to say the rest of what they have to say, we have to respect that person's point of view. And as long as it's done artfully and tastefully. And once we hear a person say, well, I feel, then I have to step back as a father and say, okay, my child is trying to express a point of view and an opinion, and I need to not take it personal, but I need to understand that this is how my child feels. And I need to respect it, whether I agree with it or disagree with it. I'm listening to how they feel. And if we learn to do that, and we begin to teach that in our community. And I pray that those watching this right now, who are listening to this, they've just picked up on what I've just said. Well, then we've just done our part, you and I, Jocelyn, at helping to spread that word out. Because once someone says, I feel, now I have given them the freedom to say what they need to say. And I have, as a parent, I have to sit back and listen and go, okay, I hear you. And that's how that starts.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that that's what our kids want most is just to be heard.
Yeah.
Just to be heard, just to be seen, just to know that you notice them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we can say things, and sometimes our parenting methods are causing more harm than good, and we don't even recognize what we're doing. And we would never in a million years, if we knew our actions were doing to their souls, we would never do that. So it is important that we give them the voice to be able to say, that hurt my feelings, or that made me feel insecure, or that made me feel like you didn't love me, or that made me feel like I see how you treat one person and you treat me another way.
Yeah.
And kids in their own way of perceiving things sometimes think that you love the other more than you love, one child.
Yeah.
And I've dealt with that in my life, but our children are different. They have different personalities, and each one of them, they have to be treated differently. They need different things from us. So some of our children, they're just, you got to come with them with the tenacity and tenaciousness. And then there
Yes.
are other ones that you can't talk to them that way. They just don't have the personality, the spirit, or the capacity to be able to see harshness from you. And so you have to know your children and know how to communicate with them, and not just be saying, well, this is just who I am, and this is just how I'm going to do it. I don't care about your feelings. And that's the thing. I think what you said is, I feel, allowing a child to say, I feel. We were always taught not to care about your
Nobody care about what you feel like. Go sit down.
down, go sat down somewhere, but what we're seeing is it has not benefited us as a community. And so I thank you for what you're sharing, how going through the counseling has taught you and your wife how to honor the voice of your children and allow them to communicate when they feel a certain way, because their feelings, they do matter.
Yeah. And can I quickly, because let me give a shout out to our life coach who actually taught those classes. Her name is Pam Woods.
Okay.
And she was a life coach that sat with us and really counseled us and nurtured us through that entire process. So her name is Pam Woods, life coach, and she's a member at First Baptist Church, Capitol Hill, here in Nashville, Tennessee. So if they want to look her up on Facebook or Google her. Her name is Pam Woods. Look for her in Nashville. And so, but we took the classes at First Baptist Church, Capitol Hill, here in Nashville, Tennessee. So shouts out to her.
Well, I would love to do more than shout out to Miss Woods. I would like for you to connect me with Miss Woods so that I could have an interview with her, and she can
Yes.
elaborate a little bit more to us.
Consider it done.
Yes,
Consider it done.
to our children and how to just build this family the way that it needs to be built. We've done our thing. It's over.
Yes.
But we can help the next generation to do better than what we've done with the knowledge, the keys, and the tools. So I'm excited to be able to sit down with Miss Woods. Thank you so much, Miss Woods, for what you're teaching and what you're doing and building and changing the paradigm shift for African American families and how we see one another. We appreciate it.
Amen. Amen.
Okay, it has been an awesome interview. I mean, the fact that Mr. Lawson says he loves being a father.
Yes.
Yes. So I know this is like for a lot of us, like he loves being a what?
Yeah.
You know, because I'm thinking right about now, a lot of us parents are at home now 24/7 with our children because of COVID-19.
Yes, I know.
Figure this thing out, you know. I'm used to them
Yes.
being with the teacher 8, 9 hours out of the day. Now I'm the one that's with them all day, and this is,
Yes.
you know. But I hope that what Mr. Lawson has shared with you all, I love my children. I love
Yes.
my
Yes.
children.
That's right.
Will resonate with you, and you will, you know, love on them a little bit more, and see them the way God sees them. They're gifts. You know, I know that society tells they're a burden. No, they're not a burden. They are gifts. And you know, going back to you and being a blended family, you know, they have this thing in the world where they say that our children are baggage. When you're a single mother, men look back and step back and they do the judgment thing. Oh, she got baggage. You know, what does that mean, baggage? How did a blessing turn into baggage? Can you help us with that?
I think that's just a stereotype.
Okay.
I've never, at least me myself personally, I've never looked at that at any point in my life. I've never looked at it from that perspective. I find the strongest women that I know and have seen have been the single mom. That's the person who has to um, get up every day, make sure the kids are up every day, make sure the kids have clothes, make sure they eat, teach them. I mean, every little thing that we do as human beings. Just imagine that mom doing that on a daily basis from sun up to sundown. And so, if there are any single moms watching this, my hats off to you, and kudos to you, because you are a true blessing. You are a true dynamic, a wonder, and God bless you for what you continue to do. Um, and my prayer is always that the right godly man will come your way and see the value in you and just begin to nurture you and treat you like the queen that you are, and puts a ring on your finger and begins to turn that single parent home into a well blended family home where all of you are living under the auspice of God and getting the blessings of God.
Amen. You know, something I'm seeing now is that you have young men now, they're living at home with their family, but they won't marry the mother. What is
Mhm.
that about? Do you know?
Yeah. A lot of it is about self esteem and the willingness to make a commitment to forsake other women.
Mm.
That's really what that's about. And those are the two things that I teach, and I have continued to teach, and I've taught my sons and daughters, especially my sons. And I say, hey, look, put a ring on her finger, make an honest woman out of her. And if you're not going to do that, then you need to leave her alone. And I say this because I would say that to I have grandkids. So to my sons, and if they'll ever watch this, they know that I'm telling the truth. Marry her or set her free. Because if you're not, and that's the same advice per se that my father was giving me all those many years ago. Don't string her along. Because here's the thing. If you live, and for the young ladies who are hearing this, you're going to have to begin to draw a line in the sand as to how long you want to stay in that posture. Because here's what tends to happen. If you've had kids at a younger age and you're in a relationship with your co-parent, and you all are just sort of dating and hooking up for 3 or 4 years, then 5 years, and then you're not committed. Now that's 5 years, 3 to 5 years of your life that you as a woman have sacrificed on a man or a young man that decides not to commit, when you could have ended that early and decided to go ahead and focus on your home and your household, and possibly meet someone who sees the value in you as a wife and marry you, and you go ahead and go along on your journey. Instead, what you've done is you've waited, and waited and waited. And even if you say, well, I'm not really wanting to be with him like that, well, then you cut him loose. Don't hook up with him no more. No more. And cut him loose so that there is a clear boundary being set that the only thing that you two are going to be is co-parents. That's it. Co-parents, providing nurture and finances for the benefit of their child, and that's it. And if he sees it that way and she sees it that way, then they'll be the better off for it in trying to, at some point, become a husband or a wife. So that young man slash boy, whatever we want to call him, that is on mama's couch, that is still single and still got a girlfriend, but still got, a child over here or whatever he's doing, at some point, he's got to realize, what am I going to do with my life? And I'll say this to you young men, the right woman in your life will help you pull all that together. The right woman. Because if you're dating somebody who doesn't really care too much for kids, or she didn't care too much for your kids, and you're still having drama between the person you're dating and then your co-parent, well, then how's that going to work out? And vice versa if you're the woman. If you have all that unnecessary drama going back and forth and now it's playing out all over Facebook and Instagram and you're arguing and bickering, well then what about the child? So the quicker you put an end to all that and just focus on your child, then the better. It's one thing to be at home on the couch while you're trying to get your life together and you're just being a parent, nothing else, just a parent, while you work on getting yourself together. But you can't be living at home with mommy and daddy while you still out, smashing over here and smashing over there and then smashing your co-parent and doing all and living like that. That's trifling.
You were bringing all these different scenarios in. What went to my mind is, Lord, you knew the right way. That's why he told us, don't have sex outside of marriage. Marriage is
Yes.
for marriage, because it just brings
Amen.
a plethora of stuff,
It does.
never meant to go through, we've done it.
Yeah.
For grace, but what can we do to help the next generation not to
Mhm.
that? There's nothing we can do about what we've done. All we can do is help the next generation to not make the mistakes that we made. So how can we be the type of people that they will hear our voice, first of all, that they would trust our voice? That how can we get to a place where they are people who look to us and see us and say, that's how I want my life to be? And do we even have the heart to care? Do we even have the heart to care what this next generation looks like? What do you think?
Yeah, one person at a time, one step at a time, and you have to have credibility. That's what the book #Fatherhood is about. As I was talking to my wife one time before, I said, you know what? This book, my credibility, in order for me to be able to say the things that I'm saying to you, and also to have written the stuff that I wrote in that book, that's my credibility out there. My kids read that book. They have a copy of that book. So either I'm lying or I'm telling the truth. And so I spent the past 20 something years trying to get it right. And so that's a lot of, so the book is to me, if you ask me what you are asking me, it's credible. So the fact that I've given it to my kids, I said, here's sort of a manual on how to sort of get through some of these things. You have to have credibility. That's one of the things when I looked in the mirror over 20 something years ago and said, I don't like the person I see. Lord, help me fix this. Help me fix me. How I'm living is just, it's just awful. And I feel awful on the inside. Lord, help me, fix me. And once I got to that place, once I said that to myself, once I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, I know people heard that expression before, that was when God was able to lead me and direct my path. And I've got to say, he has done everything that he said he would do. Every single thing. Everything that I have asked God to do to help me to get to this place where I am now, God has done. The fact that I'm on the Josilyn Drake Show, that's God. That's God. From where I've been, from where I've come from, and some of the unwise decisions that I've made to now being on this interview with you, that's God. And so you have to connect with people who have credibility in the areas that I'm speaking of, so that they can begin to mentor and teach and nurture and cause us all to grow as a village.
You said a lot. There are two more questions that I want to
Mhm.
ask you before we conclude the interview. One is we have a segment called Dear Younger Me, and it is what we would say to our younger self. And we do that in hopes that something you say will encourage, inspire, motivate, or help someone else not to go down that path. And then the second thing I want to conclude with is I want you to speak to our men as a father, our young men as a father, and then I want you to speak to our young women as a father. I want you to give some wisdom. Just think about some things you told your daughter as though they're your daughter. Would you just share a bite of wisdom to our young men and to our young women, and then I'm going to let you go and get back to your wife.
Yeah. Yes.
your list of things that she has for you to be doing,
Yes.
and we appreciate you. So first of all, what would you say to the younger Exum?
What I would say to the younger Exum, I would have to write another book to myself and go back in time and say, here, do everything in here. But that's what this book is about. You giving it to the younger versions of myself and say, here, you better read this. But I would say to the younger me to keep God first in my life and surround myself with people who are trying to not only put God first in their lives, but also who are trying to live a life of maximizing their potential. I didn't do those things when I was younger. I felt as though clubbing and drinking and hanging out and doing those things was what it was all about. And so as a result of that, you get exactly who you surround yourself with. I surrounded myself with one of my best friends was a former drug dealer from Virginia, and the other one was a former convicted felon who was an armed robber who had spent time in prison. And those were my boys. And all we did, I did work, but every day when I got home from work, they were over to my house, over to the crib. We sit around, have a drink, and then go out to the club or go do something. Just think if I had have spent that time just saying to the Lord, thank you, taking the resources that I had instead of going out and trying to find the next hookup or somebody to smash, if I had taken that time to further my education a lot sooner and put some things in place and then spend some time asking the Lord, Lord, show me the right woman for me. Show me the right young lady that I should date. What is your desire for me? And allow him to lead me. And then trust that he would bring her into my life. And then after doing so, having brought her into my life, then we begin to worship God together. Then we begin to plan a life together. Then we begin to combine our finances together. Then we start doing power moves and making power decisions together. And then we just start growing our family together in one household. Then it's easier for me to be a father and to implement God's plan in the life of my children. And that model that it was set. That's what I would say to myself. But I broke that model. And that's okay. That's okay. So to any young man or young woman who heard what I just said about what that model should look like, and you still have an opportunity to have that model in your life, follow that model. But if you did not do that and you made some unwise decisions along the way, I say to you, stop where you are, just repent from all that you have done, ask the Lord to come into your life wholeheartedly and ask him to direct your path. Stop having premarital sex if you're having it. Cut those ties. Know that you are a child of God and that God loves you, and begin to change the direction and the dynamic of the place that God wants to take you in. That also means that you may have to cut off some friends and maybe even some family members if that comes to it. That's what one of the things I had to do. I had to cut off some of those friends that I had and replace them with better friends, friends that have my better interest at heart. You are the company you keep. And so I know that may seem like it's a tough thing to do, but think about the alternative. Are you really happy with where you are in life right now? And if you're not totally happy, if you're not totally satisfied, then turn it over to the Prince of Peace and walk with the Prince of Peace, and that's Jesus Christ.
Awesome, awesome. So, what would you say to a young woman, your as your daughter? What's the one some of the best advice that you could give them?
The advice that I constantly and I still give my daughters, and this is inclusive of any young lady that's watching this right now, is that you are valuable, you are strong, you are dynamic, and we as men ought to do a better job at making sure that we put value on you. Your body is sacred. Your a young man and a man should know you because of what's up here in your mind and less about what's underneath your clothes. You don't have to dress to sort of have get a bunch of likes on social media. What you put out is what you get back. You can dress and be classy and still get just as many likes. You don't have to show your body. You don't have to show everything. Save that for the man that's desirous of putting that ring on your finger. Because the signal, and this is one of the things that I taught my daughters, the signal that you put out, if you dress very provocative, is that you have, for one, low self-esteem, and two, you're telling me that when I step to you, that I need to come at you in a manner that doesn't always have the best intentions. Now, I'm not saying that all women who dress that way have low self-esteem. So let me make sure I'm speaking that correctly. But if I see you dressed very provocative, and provocative can mean many different things. I won't go into detail, but I'll say this. If you're dressed in a way that is sexual in nature and has sexual undertones, then of course, part of my conversation with you is going to come from a sexual perspective. I'm not going to see your mind first because you didn't show me your mind first. I'm going to see what you showed me. And that's a perspective and the approach that I'm going to take with you. And so normally when a man is looking for a wife, he wants somebody that's compatible to something that's going on in his life. And we can't see that from our eyes. We have to see that with our heart. So show me your heart first, show him your heart first, and everything else will follow.
Wow. Ladies, great advice from a father. I pray that you hear it. We want to thank Mr. Xuam Lawson so much for taking the time to talk with us at the Josilyn Drake Show. It is my hope that something he said has blessed your life. It has awakened something in you. It has given you knowledge that you didn't have. And more than anything, it will make a better version of you. Mr. Lawson, one more time, can you tell us where we can find your book?
Yes. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. It's been an honor and a pleasure being with you on this dynamic show. And so kudos to you and much continued success in everything that you do. You can find the book. If you want the hard copy, go to my website, and that is www.xuamlawson.com. That's XUAMLAWSON.com. And you can also get it on Kindle and just type in my name, Xuam Lawson, and you'll find my book, hashtag fatherhood. I love being a father, and it's available on Kindle. On Kindle is $9.99. If you want the actual hard copy so that you can write your personal notes and do things like that, that book is $19.99. So please buy the book for yourself. Buy it from that for that significant other. If you're dating, buy it for your father. Buy it for your son. Just buy the book, and I promise you, it will bless you tremendously.
Mr. Lawson, also tell us if we're within Nashville, Tennessee, where we can tune in to Real Gospel, and what time are you on the radio?
Thank you so much. I also host my own syndicated gospel program. If you're in Nashville, you can hear it locally here at 88.1 FM. We're located on the campus of historic Fisk University, one of the world's top HBCUs. And so You can also come by the studios of the WED DeVore Hall. We're located on the 3rd floor. I'd be honored to meet you when you're in town. We'll make sure that you get an opportunity to see the campus of Fisk University. We're also right down the street from Tennessee State University, as well as Meharry Medical College and the American Baptist College. Our city has 4 HBCUs. So come through anytime. And next time, when you're in town, Josh, then come on through. Once all this is over with and we're able to, have some semblance of a regular life once again, come on through and see me.
I sure will. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you once again for joining us and sharing your being very transparent with your life and your story, and helping us and helping men see what it means to be a father. People, please go out and buy your copy of #Fatherhood. I love being a father. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we will see you next time on the Josilyn Drake Show. Have a great day. Bye, guys.